If you've ever lived under an HOA, you already know the unwritten rule. The Karen on the board is always watching. And if you haven't, consider yourself lucky. I thought I was moving into a normal neighborhood. You know, a place where people just mind their own business. But no, this was a Karen-controlled HOA dystopia, and I was about to become public enemy number one. Why? Because I did the unthinkable. I parked my car in my own driveway, and for that heinous crime, I nearly ended up in handcuffs. The first night in my new home was perfectly normal. I pulled into my driveway, parked my car, and went inside to start unpacking. No alarms, no flashing sirens, no neighborhood watch mobilizing against me. So imagine my confusion when I wake up the next morning, head outside, and see a bright orange HOA violation notice slapped onto my windshield like a parking ticket from hell. Unauthorized vehicle parked in driveway. Move immediately or face penalties. I actually stood there for a solid 30 seconds just processing what I was looking at. I double-checked. Yep, that was definitely my driveway. I triple-checked. Yep, that was definitely my car. So naturally, I figured this had to be some kind of mistake. Spoiler alert, it wasn't. Being the reasonable person I am, I decided to go ask some questions. But before I could even get to the HOA office, I was ambushed. Standing outside her house, waiting for me like a final boss battle, was Karen. Now, I didn't know who she was at the time, but the short blonde bob, crossed arms, and clipboard of doom were already screaming bad news. She stared at me like I had just committed arson. Then, completely unprompted, she says, "You must be the new homeowner." Yes? And then she hits me with, "Did you read the HOA guidelines before moving in?" Not hello, not welcome to the neighborhood, just straight to the interrogation. I told her I had skimmed through them, because let's be honest, who actually reads those things? She sighed dramatically and pointed to her clipboard. "Then you should know that driveways must remain clear at all times for aesthetic purposes." Aesthetic. Aesthetic. Meanwhile, her own front yard looked like a gnome graveyard, complete with a faded flamingo army and a broken fountain. But apparently my perfectly normal car was the real issue here. At this point, I figured this was one of those stupid HOA rules that no one actually enforces. So I nodded, told her I'd look into it, and went on with my day, which in my mind meant completely ignoring it. Big mistake. Because the next morning I woke up to something even worse. My car was gone, not stolen. Oh no, that would have been less confusing. It had been towed by the HOA-approved company. And that's when I realized Karen wasn't bluffing. Did you know? Watching this video without liking and subscribing is an HOA violation. Karen personally reviewed the footage and said, "This person hasn't subscribed yet. Boot their car. So don't risk it. Hit that like button and subscribe before Karen calls a tow truck on you." All right, back to the nightmare. Now, I am not a morning person, and I am especially not a morning person when I wake up to find out that my car has been forcibly removed from my own property. So, still in pajamas and fueled by rage, I marched straight to Karen's house. And, surprise, surprise, she was already standing on her porch, sipping on what I assume was pure evil. She smirked. "Oh dear, looks like your car has been removed. Maybe next time you'll follow the rules." Oh, I wanted to scream. I wanted to flip her entire gnome collection over. But instead I gritted my teeth and said, "Karen, remove the boot. Now." She just laughed and pointed to the violation notice. "You'll have to call the HOA-approved towing company for that." I was 3 seconds away from losing my mind. So guess what? I called the police. And when they arrived, I calmly explained the situation. This is my house. That is my driveway. Karen had my car booted and towed for no legal reason. The officer turned to Karen, who was now playing the sweet neighborhood watch lady act. And then the best moment of my life happened. The officer sighed and said, "Ma'am, you cannot boot a vehicle on private property without the owner's consent." Karen's face went pale. The officer continued, "You have two options. Remove the boot immediately or we can charge you for vehicle tampering." I have never seen someone's ego collapse so fast. She had no choice but to call the tow company back to remove the boot for free, and as I stood there watching the guy unlock my car, I thought to myself, finally, it's over. I was wrong. Because that night, Karen took things to the next level. Karen files multiple complaints against me. Daily citations start flooding in. Karen gets desperate and takes things way too far. You know that feeling when you think you've won? Like you finally put an issue to rest, and now you can go back to living your life in peace? Yeah, that lasted about 6 hours before Karen decided she wasn't done with me yet. I should have known. I should have known. Because people like Karen, they don't just accept defeat, they plot. And that night, while I was relaxing in my newly reclaimed driveway, Karen was busy planning her next move. The next morning, I stepped outside to grab the mail, still feeling victorious about the whole police intervention. But then I saw it, another bright orange HOA violation notice, and I swear to you I could actually hear boss battle music playing in the background. This one read, "Unauthorized storage of a vehicle. Driveway must remain clear at all times. $150 fine." Storage. Storage? I wasn't parking a broken-down RV on my lawn. I wasn't hoarding junk cars. I was parking in my own driveway. I actually stood there holding the notice, laughing to myself like a crazy person. Because at this point, it was so unbelievably stupid that it felt like I was being pranked. But nope, this was real life. So I did what any rational person would do. I marched straight back to the HOA office to demand an explanation. But before I could even step inside, I heard the sound of furious typing. And there she was, Karen, sitting at her desk like an evil corporate executive, furiously filing HOA complaints like it was her full-time job. And I kid you not, she was printing another one right as I walked in. I cleared my throat. Really, Karen? Storage of a vehicle? Are you serious? She didn't even look up. The rules are the rules. Her deadpan delivery was honestly impressive. I held up the notice. You do realize driveways are literally designed for cars, right? She sighed dramatically, like she was being forced to deal with some unreasonable peasant. The community voted on this regulation for aesthetic purposes. Vehicles should be stored in the garage only. I blinked. My garage is full of stuff. She smirked. That sounds like a personal problem. I am not a violent person. But at that moment, I swear I actually had to remind myself that flipping her desk over was, in fact, illegal. So I walked out, knowing full well that this was not over. And boy, was I right. Because over the next 2 weeks I started getting HOA citations daily. Garbage bin placement violation, too close to the curb. Yard maintenance violation, grass too long, literally by half an inch. Exterior decor violation, because my porch light was too bright at night. At this point, it was comical. Karen wasn't just enforcing rules. She was actively inventing them, just to make my life miserable. And every time I checked my mail, I could actually feel her staring at me from her window, actively watching this unfold. I took a deep breath, turned back to the driver, and calmly said, "Yeah, you're going to want to call your dispatcher because if you touch this car, I'll be calling the police for attempted theft." The driver raised an eyebrow, pulled out his phone, and made a call right there. After a few minutes of what I assume was his boss telling him to get the hell out of there, he just nodded and left. Karen, meanwhile, turned around and stormed inside, which could only mean one thing. She wasn't done, and I had no idea what was coming next. At this point, my life had become a sitcom. Every day I woke up wondering what fresh HOA nonsense I'd have to deal with. Would it be another grass too long violation? Maybe another your garbage bin is slightly too visible fine? Or maybe, just maybe, Karen would find a new way to make my life a nightmare. Spoiler alert, she did. Because the next morning, I woke up to a noise complaint. A noise complaint against silence. Now, when I say silent, I mean literally silent. I wasn't throwing parties, I wasn't blasting music, I wasn't doing anything. But according to the HOA letter, my house was creating disruptive sounds after 10 p.m. and I actually sat there for a solid minute just trying to figure out what this even meant. I went outside to investigate, and the moment I did, there she was. Karen, standing on her porch, arms crossed, watching me like a hawk. I swear, this woman doesn't sleep. So I walked over, calmly. "Karen, what exactly was noisy about my house last night?" She smirked, and that's when I knew this was personal. "Your car door?" I blinked. "My car door?" She nodded, like she just delivered a major legal victory. "I heard you closing it around 10:15 p.m. It was disruptive." I could not believe what I was hearing. Now, most people would have given up by now. But Karen? Karen was just getting started. Because that very night she called the police on me, and no, I'm not joking. At 11 p.m. I got a knock at the door. I opened it, and there stood 2 officers. One of them looked at a notepad and sighed. "We got a report about a noise disturbance?" I literally stood there speechless. Then I just laughed, because at this point, what else could I do? I stepped aside, gestured toward my dead silent house and said, "Feel free to investigate." The officer exchanged a look with his partner, who was already tired of life. They took a quick glance around, nodded and said, "Sorry for bothering you. Have a good night." As they walked away, I heard one of them mutter, "God, I hate HOAs." And honestly, same. The next day, I got the most ridiculous letter yet. The HOA was now threatening legal action if I didn't comply with their regulations. That's right. They were threatening to sue me over parking in my own driveway, closing my car door too loudly, being a general menace to their perfect little dictatorship. Now, I wasn't a lawyer, but I knew one thing for sure. This was a bluff. So, I did what any sane person would do. I ignored it, which of course made Karen even angrier. And this? This is where she made her biggest mistake yet. Because the very next day, she called SWAT on me for parking in my driveway. You ever wake up feeling like something's off, like the universe is trying to warn you that today is about to be a disaster? Yeah, that was me. I opened my eyes, stretched, and was about to start my morning like any other day, until I heard it. A voice on a megaphone. "Come out with your hands up." I froze. Wait, what? I scrambled out of bed, ran to the window, and holy sh! My entire front yard was filled with SWAT officers. I'm talking body armor, rifles, police cars blocking the street. The full package. And me? I was standing there in my pajamas, staring at the chaos like an NPC that just loaded into the wrong cutscene. What the hell? I slowly raised my hands and shouted, "Can I help you?" An officer with a megaphone responded, "Step out of the house, now." I wasn't about to argue with a small army, so I did what any sane person would do. I walked outside with my hands up, trying to process how my Tuesday morning had turned into an action movie. The moment I stepped outside, an officer walked up, gun lowered, and asked, "Are you my name?" I nodded, still completely lost. Yeah. He studied me for a second, then sighed and motioned for his team to stand down. "Sir, we received a report about a barricaded armed suspect at this address." A what? Now at this point, my brain completely shut down. I blinked. "Officer, I have no idea what you're talking about. I just woke up." He exhaled sharply, rubbing his temple like he already regretted being here. "We received a 911 call stating that you were waving a firearm around, threatening people and refusing to leave your house." I just stared at him. Then I did the slowest, most exhausted turn of my life. And guess who was standing across the street watching the whole thing unfold? Karen. I swear she was smiling, like she had won some kind of battle. Oh, Karen, you absolute idiot. The officer noticed where I was looking, turned around, and spotted her watching the show like she was at a Broadway premiere. He sighed. "You know this woman?" I nodded. "Oh yeah, that's my lovely HOA president." His eyes darkened immediately. "She the one you've been having issues with?" I nodded again. And then, something amazing happened. The officer signaled to his team and walked straight over to Karen. She saw them coming, and suddenly, that smile disappeared. Now, I was too far away to hear exactly what was being said, but I could piece it together based on Karen's facial expressions. It went something like this. Officer calmly explains that making a false emergency call is highly illegal. Karen starts panicking and tries to act clueless. Officer pulls out a recording of her 911 call. Karen's face goes pale, handcuffs come out, and just like that, Karen was arrested. And let me tell you, watching her get escorted to a police car while the entire neighborhood stared in shock, it was the greatest moment of my life. You ever witness something so beautiful, so pure, that you feel like you should frame it and hang it on your wall? That's exactly how I felt watching Karen, queen of the HOA, get handcuffed and shoved into the back of a police car. The entire neighborhood had come out to watch. Some people gasped in shock. Others whispered amongst themselves. And me? I just stood there, arms crossed, nodding like a proud parent. Because justice? Oh, it had been served. Now, here's where it gets even better. Because as Karen was being hauled away, one of the officers came back over to me. Sir, we're charging her with filing a false police report and misuse of emergency services. Given the level of response, she could be facing some serious consequences. I had to physically stop myself from fist-pumping the air. So what happens now? I asked, trying not to sound too excited. The officer sighed. She'll likely be fined, possibly jail time, and she's going to have a record. A record. Karen. With a criminal record. I think I actually saw her soul leave her body when she overheard that. But that wasn't even the best part, because now, the HOA was scrambling. The very next day, the HOA held an emergency meeting. And by meeting, I mean a desperate attempt to distance themselves from Karen. I got a formal letter in the mail, and let me tell you, reading it was the funniest thing I had ever done. It went something like this. Dear residents, we regret to inform you that HOA Board President Karen has been relieved of her duties, effective immediately. Her recent actions do not reflect the values of our community, and we are taking necessary steps to rebuild trust. Please be assured that we will be reviewing all HOA regulations to ensure fairness moving forward. Oh, now they wanted to be fair? Where was that energy when I was getting fined for closing my car door at night? I laughed so hard I actually had to sit down. Because let's be honest, if Karen hadn't gotten caught, they would have backed her until the end. But now that she was a liability, they cut her loose faster than a bad investment. Now I could have let it go there. I had already won. Karen was gone. The HOA was in shambles. And I could finally park in my own driveway without fearing for my life, but I had one last thing I needed to do. So the next morning I walked outside, set up a lawn chair right in my driveway, and cracked open a cold drink. Then with the biggest smile on my face, I took a long, slow sip, because that was the moment it was all over. No more citations, no more HOA nonsense, no more Karen. Just me, my driveway, and the sweet, sweet taste of victory. The HOA has officially updated their guidelines. Liking this video is now mandatory. Subscribing is now a required regulation. Failing to comment below, immediate citation. So, to avoid getting an HOA fine in real life, hit that like and subscribe button, and let me know in the comments. What's the worst HOA experience you've ever had? Because if this nightmare taught me anything, it's that there are a lot of Karens out there. All right, HOA meeting adjourned.